Hi, everybody. So we have been learning about fiction and nonfiction books for the past couple of weeks. This week, we are just going to focus on fiction books. And I am going to tell you about the 6 popular genres of fiction. Now, a genre is basically a category, okay? It's like a type of fiction. And there are 6 main genres of fiction that we use in our library, okay? And the 6 genres are realistic fiction, historical fiction, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and mysteries. Okay, so those are the 6 types of fiction books that we have. I'm going to show you 6 different books from those 6 different genres and tell you a little bit about them. All right, so the first one I have up is historical fiction. And the book I want to show you is I Survived the Hindenburg Disaster of 1937. Now, I did show you guys an I Survived book a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned then that those are historical fiction books. Okay, and like I said, they are still fiction. However, they're set in a real time in history. And some of the events that happen in the book are based on that true event. But the characters in the book are made up. The things that happen in the book are a lot of times are totally made up too. And in this book, this is about a boy named Hugo whose family is traveling aboard the Hindenburg, which was a German-made Zeppelin. And what happened was when that real ship was docking in 1937, or it's an airship, not a ship like on the ocean, okay, an airship. When it was docking in 1937, it actually exploded. It was this horrible disaster. Now, that's a real thing. That actually happened. However, the story about this boy, Hugo, that's all fiction, okay? So a historical fiction book is fiction, but it's set in a real time in history, all right? And any I Survived book, that's historical fiction, okay? So another fun category that is very popular is fantasy. And this is an example of a fantasy book. This is Fablehaven by Brandon Mole, and this is part of a series. This book is about 2 kids, Kendra and her little brother, who go to visit their grandfather. And while they're at their grandfather's house, they actually find out that part of their grandfather's property is actually a preserve for magical creatures. Okay, and they actually end up in this magical world called Fablehaven, in which there's all kinds of magic stuff, unicorns, goblins, fairies, trolls, there's even an evil witch, okay? And all of these are characters that come out of fantasy. When we talk about books that are fantasy, there's always an element of magic to it, okay, or magical creatures. There's nothing in here that's realistic, okay? This is not something that could actually happen. It's all magic, okay? Another great example of fantasy would be Harry Potter, okay? The Harry Potter books, that is fantasy, absolutely. All right, so one of my favorite categories of fiction or genres of fiction, especially when I was a kid, was horror. I always love scary stuff. So this is a horror series that is very popular, which is called Shadow House, and it is written by Dan Pawlowski. And in this book, a bunch of kids, let me just make sure, 5 kids are given an invitation to spend the night in a very mysterious house. And when they get there, they realize they're trapped in the house. And there are ghosts in that house, and it's a haunted house, and they got to find their way out. And this is part of a series. Just look at the cover of the book. That is a creepy looking cover. Okay, so horror books always have a very scary element to them. There might be ghosts in it, or monsters, or things like that, but it's, scary stuff. Now, I will say, if you don't like scary stuff, don't read a horror book, okay? Some of us, we really like scary stuff. Other people don't, and that is okay. So this is the Shadow House series, a good example of horror. Now, another very popular type of fiction is science fiction. This is an example of science fiction. This book is called Gamer Army, and it is written by Trent Reedy. And this book is all about a boy who's really good at video games. And in fact, he becomes so good at this one particular video game that he gets invited to this big video game tournament that's being held at a very mysterious island. But when he gets there, he realizes that the video game, it's not pretend, it's real life. And there are killer robots and all kinds of crazy stuff going on in this book. Now, science fiction uses elements of science in its story. And a lot of the times it'll be a book that's like set in the future, or it might have to do with like robots or time travel, okay? Things that, you know, have a scientific element to it. But like I said, it's fiction, okay? None of this could happen in real life, but it's using science as its element of fiction, okay? All right. Another very popular genre of fiction is mystery. And a mystery always has a detective as its main character. Now, this is an example of a classic mystery. This is Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Old Clock, and that's written by Carolyn Keene. Now, if you have never heard of Nancy Drew, she is one of the most famous female detectives in children's literature. This book, The Secret of the Old Clock, is actually the first Nancy Drew book. It was written back in 1930. Okay, this was a series my grandmother used to read Nancy Drew books. My mom used to read Nancy Drew books. I read Nancy Drew books. Now maybe you want to read Nancy Drew books. And there are the older ones like these, and then there have been newer versions of Nancy Drew over the years. Okay, a mystery book, I always find that mysteries follow a certain formula, okay? Always we have our main character as the detective. Always there is some sort of crime or a mysterious thing that happens at the beginning, and the detective has to search for clues, look at suspects, and then always what happens at the end of a mystery? It gets solved. Okay, and the bad guy is caught, right? And there's always something, some way of tying up the loose ends, definitely at the end of a mystery. So I would definitely recommend Nancy Drew. Some other great mysteries are Encyclopedia Brown, The Hardy Boys, Sammy Keys. We have a lot of great mysteries at the library. So if you're ever interested, when we're back in the library, I could show you some excellent mysteries, or you can always check them out at the public library too. All right, we got one more genre of fiction that I want to show you, and that is realistic fiction. Now, this is an example of realistic fiction. This is The Report Card by Andrew Clements. This book is actually about a girl named Nora who is a genius. She is super duper smart. However, she doesn't want everyone to know that because she's afraid people are going to make fun of her. So she gets into some hijinks while she tries to hide her own intelligence. Now, this is an example of realistic fiction because this is a book about a kid like you, okay? Just a regular kid going to school, doing things that kids do. All right. And that's what realistic fiction is. It's a book that's realistic. It could happen in real life. There's no aliens. There's no vampires. There's no time travel, any of the other stuff from the other books. It's just usually about kids going about their day, just like you guys, dealing with issues that kids deal with. Okay. So that's realistic fiction. All right. So once again, our 6 genres of fiction are realistic fiction, mystery, science fiction, horror, fantasy, and historical fiction. Now, on the Google Classroom, I have made a document that you are going to do and then turn in to me when you're done. You're going to have a bunch of book covers that I put, I believe there's 12 of them. You are going to label each one for whatever genre it is a part of. You're going to use each genre 2 times, okay? And then the last 2 questions are open-ended about what your favorite genre of fiction is. When you're all done, turn it in. Have a lovely week, everybody.